I'm gonna say this one time, so pay attention. In case the thumbnail and the title weren't clear enough, this video is going to have spoilers for Marvel, The Avengers, Endgame. I'm gonna talk about some deaths, I'm gonna talk about some plot points, I'm gonna talk about stuff that happened. If you don't want to know, click off now. I'm gonna play my intro. You have another 7 seconds. You've been warned. So, you wanted a video intro. Hi, I'm Amanda and you're watching Swell Entertainment. I know that may have seemed a little overdramatic, but I'm very tired of everything I've been seeing on Twitter. I saw Endgame last night. By the time I dropped my friend off who went with me, it was close to midnight. I couldn't go to sleep for a long time, and then I had to get up at 5 a.m. for work. I was at work for about 8 hours. It's now the evening time. I'm very tired. There's no script. I'm just gonna ramble and talk about stuff that I have feelings about that I liked and didn't like. I liked the movie. Let me make that clear. I liked the movie. I'm not mad at it, but there are things where I have questions about and things that I'm also like, okay, but what about this? I just have opinions about the Russos in general. Let's get right in. There's no order to this. I'm gonna hip hop around like always. I would like to say that I'm gonna try and keep this short, but we all know that's a load of. Let me start out with something that was annoying me and also set a tone for the movie before I even walked in. I'm so tired of the spoiler thing. Don't spoil the endgame. I don't have a problem with like tagging spoilers. I've tagged it on other videos I've done. I'm tagging it up the ass on this one. And I understand holding off posting spoilers. Spoiler is a fan term. And the fact that the Russos and Marvel have coined it for Endgame for like, oh, don't spoil the endgame, and they're using it for marketing, I don't like. I also think the Russos took the spoiler avoidance for this movie to an obscene level that I don't think is necessary. When you sign on for a movie, typically you sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, meaning that you can't talk about the movie or certain aspects of the movie or publish aspects of the movie, and if you do, you get sued. Disney is like a huge company, and I know that Marvel actors occasionally have loose lips, but also, I'm sorry, half of these spoilers that like Avengers casts have let out, half of those I think are staged. Some of them are far too convenient, and also some are just straight up accidents. Like Mark Ruffalo accidentally streamed 15 minutes of Thor Ragnarok. That was an accident. The Russos taking it to the point of having certain actors learn completely separate scenes, having them learn lines, having them go through the motions of filming things, having Tom Holland film complete scenes alone so that he doesn't know who he's shooting with is so insane. It's so unnecessary. If you were really that worried, then start suing people. It's that simple. As horrible as that sounds, because I don't want anyone to get sued, and I don't want someone to be like, you want people to get sued. No, I want them to not do this extra bullshit that takes up manpower and time and kind of with your actors. It's excessive. It really is. And also, spoiler culture has gotten to such a obscene level. The fact that I've seen critics, like film reviewers, people who review films for a living, talking about how I'm not posting spoilers, but I really enjoyed the movie. And their responses are people mad that they're saying they enjoyed it. Are you kidding me? Grow the up. Before the movie came out, I had 2 of the deaths spoiled for me. I was clicking on a tweet from Marvel, and in the responses, there were people spamming spoilers. I get not wanting that. I get that 100%. However, those deaths, knowing about them beforehand, did not ruin the movie for me. And if it did, you made a movie. For me, going into Endgame, I had the expectation that I was going to be disappointed. Despite everything that I saw about people being excited, like, oh, it was great, all the stuff, you're going to love it. I went in with the expectation that I was going to be disappointed because of how heavy they pushed the no spoiler aspect. Because that makes me think that you wrote a twist and a couple of death scenes and not a story. That's all it makes me think of. Luckily, that's not what happened. I very much enjoyed this movie, and I've been a ball of anxiety because I know that there's no fixing what happened in the movie. This is the end game. There's no more. No one's coming back. Like, what's happened happened, which is depressing on a lot of levels. I just need to get this video done, filmed, and edited, and out so I can start the grieving process. But yeah, I just think that in the future that they drop the whole like, oh, don't spoil it, and they just stop with the extra filming and all that because it's so excessive. I just think that it's taking it to a point that it doesn't need to be at. All I'm saying. The Russo brothers clearly didn't like Thor Ragnarok and everything that Taika Waititi did with Thor's characterization, and just between Infinity War and Endgame, they gave him back an eye despite knowing that he could fight without one and was still terrifying person to fight. Okay, let me backtrack. One thing that I really liked about this movie is that we finally get characters talking to each other and talking to others about the that they've had to deal with. And that's something that a lot of other movies have just kind of skipped over and just don't give the time of day because they're badass superheroes and no one wants to see them struggling with their PTSD despite that that's the reality of the situation. In this movie, for the most part, everyone's feelings about losing everyone and then thinking that there's hope to go to defeat Thanos to get the stones and then he's already destroyed the stones and then Thor does kill him, he goes for the head. There's no solace there because they can't bring everyone back. They still lost. So everyone's dealing with that for 5 years and everyone's feelings about that are treated as valid and their reaction to everything are treated as valid, except for Thor. Thor has had a rough time. They made it so that he basically regressed quite a bit. He no longer is fit to lead. He has just abandoned his people. He's drinking heavily, plays video games and trash talks 11-year-olds on the internet, and he's gotten a beer belly, which I'm not saying that like, oh, they shouldn't have made him fat, but it's treated as a joke the entire time and like, oh, he's not worthy of anything now because he's just fat. They gave him Stormbreaker and Mjolnir back despite he needed to lose his hammer in Thor Ragnarok to show that he was more than just his hammer and that it was in fact an inhibitance onto his powers. Once you get rid of that, so much more power. Instead, they give him back his hammer and they give him Stormbreaker as if he's not capable of fighting without those things. Throughout the rest of the movie, other characters are making snide comments about how he looks and how he's eating and how he's drinking and how he's not capable of holding the stones and all this other stuff. And it's just like everyone else's depression and response to the snap happening. The snapping is treated as valid except for Thor's. And I didn't like that. Just my opinion. I do not have a problem with him leaving Valkyrie in charge of the new Asgard. I don't have a problem with that. I do like the idea of him joining the Guardians of the Galaxy. I hope the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 involves them looking for Gamora because that's what it looks like they were setting up because it said searching and it's got Gamora's picture. Different Gamora than the Gamora that died, but I mean, I'm happy they brought her back even if it's a different Gamora. And, I also hope they end up finding Loki because I'm sorry, Loki's alive. I don't care what anyone says. Where is he? I was fully expecting Loki to show up in the final battle after the Tesseract scene. I know someone's gonna say, oh, well, no, they put everything back. They didn't take the Tesseract in 2012. They had to go back to 1970 to get the Tesseract from when it was at the base. So yeah, they put it back then, but then it would still end up in that time frame. So I think that Loki still made off with the Tesseract. Where's Loki? So I hope that Guardians of the Galaxy or maybe even the next Thor movie with Valkyrie and all them, they find Loki. Surprise. Tony's death. I wasn't happy that Tony died, but he was one of the deaths that I knew was coming. I'm glad he went out the way that he did. You know, he saved everyone. He's the one that made the final snap. He made that choice. He knew what was happening. And, you know, he got to say goodbye to Pepper. He got to say goodbye to Rhodey. He got to say goodbye to Peter. He got to say goodbye to them. I wish he would have gotten a better chance to say goodbye to Morgan, but that's just me. Oh yeah, they have a kid. Did I mention that? That was rough. Funeral scene was rough. The blonde boy, by the way, I can't remember the little boy's name, but in Iron Man 3, the little boy that he teams up with, yeah, that's the same actor playing that kid. So he came to Tony's funeral, which is really, really sad. But that was a good send-off for him, you know, having everyone there. I thought that was good. But yeah, I'm not happy he died. Steve's ending. Now, I want to make something clear. I don't have a problem with Steve ending up with Peggy. Despite the questions I have about it, I don't have a problem with it. I know someone's gonna be like, you only don't like it, you only have questions about it because you wanted Steve and Bucky to end up together. Not gonna lie, I did. If you watched my last video, I referred to Steve Rogers as our bisexual icon. Hate to break it to you, women are included in that, therefore Peggy. I have questions about it, and I'm not a fan of it, not because he got his happy ending or whatever, but because predominantly Peggy and him seem out of left field compared to his trilogy. Yes, First Avenger, I had a date, all that, he's upset about that, he talks, it's mentioned briefly in Avengers, but then in The Winter Soldier and Civil War, which the Russo's directed, by the way, we see him going to visit Peggy and kind of going through the stages of grief and meeting Sharon, her niece. I'm never gonna be over that, but again, and they reduced her down to like a love interest, of course, and like made her, Marvel doesn't exactly have the best track record with their female characters, but that's a whole other thing. And then so him like forging that with Sharon, and then Civil War they kiss and it's kind of like, oh, this is the future type of thing, or it's with Bucky type of thing, and you just get the sense that Steve had moved on from Peggy, and then Infinity War happens, and then Endgame happens, and it's like, oh yeah, Peggy, I lost love of my life, he still has the compass, and it's like, okay, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe she was the love of his life, like, no harm, no foul, like, whatever, but it just seemed, compared to everything else, like a step backwards, and not to say that there's nothing wrong and that Steve doesn't deserve to have a good life and deserve to grow old with someone he loves. It didn't have to be Peggy. Also, I know because of time travel and all that, this technically, my next point may be like, oh, well, that can be explained away by this. I'm not going to argue with anyone about time travel in my comment section. I'm going to say say that right now. Peggy got married, at least in the timeline of everyone else that Thanos happened. Peggy was married at that time. Sharon's her niece, so you know that all happened. And I understand that yes, in this timeline that Steve went back to, technically Steve could have met Sharon before she ended up with her husband and then he got married to her, but it's still like a whole thing. I don't know. There's a lot happening. Did Steve bring that up, that he tried to bone Sharon? In my future, I tried to bone your niece. Think he brought that up? Because again, it just seems out of left field with everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, like Steve and Sharon was like really cringy and I'm happy to forget that, but I mean, like, I don't think the directors that like made that a thing also want us to forget that. Also, I'm upset by that because of why I know it happened and like him growing old and all that. I know why that happened. Basically, the reason that Steve goes back in time and ages the way that he does was because Chris Evans genuinely believes that eventually, if he doesn't leave the franchise on his own accord, like, this is when I'm done, that the franchise or the fans are gonna get sick of him and basically get rid of him. And his wording he used was, you get off the train before you get thrown off or kicked off or whatever. That's really upsetting that he thinks that that's a possibility of the fans wanting that at all. But at the same time, we don't know what goes on these sets. We don't know what happens behind the scenes. We don't know what he's experienced as an actor. I'm not gonna pretend to understand what Chris Evans is thinking. It's just disappointing that that's why Steve got the ending that he did. I like that they didn't even mention Vision once in this movie until Wanda showed up. Like, I was full on expecting, like, when Tony came back to Earth and he's like, I lost him, I lost the kid, and then they're like, we lost everybody. I was expecting at least some type of reaction from Tony for losing Vision. Nope, he's not mentioned. They don't talk about it. I don't know, I thought it was funny that they just straight up did not bring him up until the end. Happy and Pepper, oh my god, the ending was rough just because of that. Happy just having a bonding moment with Morgan, and he's like, are you hungry? What do you want to eat? And she just goes, cheeseburgers. And he just goes, your dad liked cheeseburgers. I'm gonna give you all the cheeseburgers in the world. That's so sweet. He's gonna be such a good uncle. Him and Aunt May are gonna try and bone in Far From Home, aren't they? I already covered this, but like, I like that Gamora's back, even though it's not the same Gamora that was lost, because obviously that's not going to happen. I'm glad that she's back and the possibilities that come with it. Hulk/Banner is now boyfriend material. Mark Ruffalo has been hinting that this is the final film. He didn't die in this movie. He didn't age in the past, you know, there's nothing like that. He didn't jump off a cliff. So is he just retiring as Hulk now? Because he says that he's done, like he's not doing any more. But we didn't really get an ending for Hulk. He's just done. Okay, I guess. Nat's death, I teared up. I wasn't full on sobbing. I started crying when they got to the planet because I knew what had to happen and they didn't, and they were like chatting about it. They were like, this isn't Budapest, we got a call back. You know, they're smiling to each other about being in space, and then suddenly one of them has to die, and I was just like, this is so rough. And then when they're trying to fight each other to make it over the bridge, and it's like reminiscent of when they were trying to fight each other in the original Avengers movie. Oh god, that scene was rough. I have questions though. She has a movie coming out, and I know it's trying to be like an origin story, like when she's in the Red Room type of thing. What if that movie makes a shit ton of money and they want to make 6 more Black Widow movies? They can't do that unless they recast, which I doubt they will. They can't do that. They killed her, and they made it abundantly clear she cannot be brought back. Is Marvel just really that against making multiple Black Widow movies where they were like, we're just gonna kill her off? Honestly, I think killing Nat off in Endgame is gonna hurt the Black Widow movie because everyone knows there's nothing past that, you know? Like, the Black Widow movie is going to happen, and regardless of how it is, we're not gonna get another movie with Black Widow set in the future because she's dead. I'm so tired. Okay, I have no complaints about Sam being the new Captain America. I have no complaints whatsoever. I'm glad that that's the route they chose. I would have liked for Bucky to get a better goodbye with Steve at the end. At the end of the day, I truly think that most of the characters in this movie deserved better, but that's just me. I'm not mad about what happened, but I do think that most of them deserve better. The LGBT thing, I'm mad. The Russos again. The Russos need to stop. I'm gonna be honest, I'm glad for multiple reasons that the Russos have not announced anymore, that they've said they're done for now with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm glad, please stop. But basically, for those of you who don't know, before Endgame came out, they talked about introducing the first openly LGBT character into the MCU. There was a lot of hype, you know, people were like, oh my god, is it Valkyrie, is it Carol, is it Loki, is it Steve, is it Bucky, and you know, anyone in the main cast. And instead, what we got in Endgame was a scene where Steve is the what do we do now that they're gone? It's like a support group that he's running, so he's taken on the role of Sam, essentially. Joe Russo, one of the directors, is playing a character. Let me check my notes. What was his name? Guy in meeting number 1 starts talking about how he went on a date for the first time since the snap, and how the guy started crying before the salad came and he started crying to dessert. Thank you. You are the true allies. Thank you for this LGBT representation in your blockbuster movie. My bisexual heart can rest easy. Suck my dick. Oh my god. And then they did this interview where they talk about how they felt it was important for one of them to play this role. And they claim it's because it was important to show that, like, as a filmmaker, it was important for us to have this. I don't think that's it at all. I think the two of you were afraid to cast anyone else, whether it was one of the main characters or a whole other random extra in that role, because there's implications that they're going to come forward and be more of a role in the future. You've made it clear that you probably aren't going to do any more, so you're not introducing a character. You had a background character. It's not a character that you're introducing into the MCU. You have a background character in a small scene who had 2 lines where he mentioned going on a date with a dude where they both cried. I wouldn't have an issue with this if they didn't hype it up. What I hope we get to in the future with films and TV shows and everything is that they don't hype up the LGBT aspect. I just hope in the future it's a more normalized thing and they stop making press releases about it, especially when you have this abysmal bullshit in your film. Before someone hops into my mentions and says, "You're trying to shove homosexuality down my throat," bullshit. They advertised this, saying they were introducing the first LGBT person into this franchise, and instead we got a side character in one scene. Don't even try me. The entirety of the Captain America trilogy was better representation than that scene. Next. Something that I liked in this film that a lot of the other Avengers films always lacked was them actually talking through issues together in more of a cordial way, like when they're talking about finding out the stones and learning about the stones. They're working through things together and they're having cordial conversations. They're snacking, they're eating, they're working together on a problem in a way that doesn't involve throwing each other against a wall or being assholes to each other or one person over talking the other. It's like a group thing. That's what I wanted from most of these other films, was just them being cordial to each other and being friendly to each other. And this movie essentially gave me that. I'm going to leave this video and I'm probably gonna go see Endgame a couple more times because I have more friends that want to see it. I'm going to live in denial. Think of the MCU as still being stuck in 2012. All the Avengers live in the tower. They have family movie nights. They're actually friendly to each other. They all are in therapy. And every once in a while there's a prank war. I don't give a shit. I will live in a pit of denial on Archive of Our Own. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed Endgame. If you decided to watch this video having not seen Endgame, I hope you do enjoy Endgame. For those of you thinking the MCU is done, it's definitely not. Yes, it is the end of stage 3 after Spider-Man Far From Home. It's the end of an era, but it's not the end of the MCU. I'm excited to see what the actors are going to be working on in the future. That's that. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Special thanks to my patrons, Sarah, Byron, and Aaron, for supporting me on my Patreon. If you would like to also support me on my Patreon, the link will be posted down below. Follow me on all my social medias. I'll put that all up here. And that's that on that. That's it. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed and probably forever live in a pit of denial. Everyone's alive. Have a great night. Peace out. Rock on. Sleep tight. Love you 3000. Do you think that Steve told Peggy that he tried to f her niece before or after they got married?